Interesting coincidence. We just received a report of a stolen bike matching this description. Officer Emil Larkin didn't even bother looking at her. His boots circled the matte black Ducati, as if he had already decided it wasn't hers. The accusation sounded practiced. He saw leather. He saw a black woman on a $28,000 machine. He saw something that didn't fit the story he had already written in his head. Cora Bowmont stood still with her helmet under her arm, hands open and visible. 20 years of federal training kept her face calm and unreadable. She knew there was no report, only an assumption that had already hardened into action. She tried to speak, but Larkin cut her off. His hand clamped around her arm and spun her toward the bike. The cuffs snapped tight around her wrists. Whatever story you've got, save it for booking. What Officer Larkin didn't know was that the woman he had just handcuffed on a public street had the authority to dismantle everything he had spent 4 years quietly building. The engine had hummed beneath her, like a living thing only minutes earlier. Cora Bowmont had leaned into the curve of Meridian Boulevard and felt the tension leave her shoulders for the first time in weeks. The matte black Ducati responded exactly the way she needed it to. Smooth, controlled, alive. Around her, Mon County moved through a warm afternoon. Store windows, oak trees, families walking sidewalks without a care in the world. She was borrowing that feeling today. One day off. 20 years chasing fugitives for the FBI, and the calendar had finally given her a single Saturday with nothing on it. No briefings, no files, no dead ends. Just a road and the motorcycle her husband Wade had loved more than almost anything. After he died, she rebuilt the bike herself. Every bolt, every panel, every wire. It took 8 months. She cried through most of it. But when she finally turned the ignition and the engine roared back to life in her garage, something inside her chest loosened for the first time since the funeral. Wade would have loved that sound. She had been riding to her mother's house across town. Pot roast, sweet tea, the familiar smell of a kitchen that meant safety. She was already thinking about which chair she'd sit in when the blue lights appeared behind her. Cora checked her mirrors. A patrol cruiser sat directly behind her. Her mind ran through the last mile automatically. Speed, lane position, stop signs. Everything was clean. Still, she pulled over. The Ducati rolled smoothly to the curb. She shut off the engine, swung off the seat, and removed her helmet. 2 officers stepped out of the cruiser. The first walked toward her with complete certainty. Medium height, broad chest. His name tag read Larkin. He studied the bike first. Then her. Then the bike again. Something about the combination irritated him. His partner, Garver, stayed near the cruiser. License and registration, Larkin said. Cora kept her voice level. Good afternoon, officer. Can I ask why I was pulled over? Larkin ignored the question. We received a report. A bike matching this description was involved in a theft earlier today. Cora held his gaze. What's the report number? The question caught him off guard. Ma'am, step off the bike. I asked for the report number. His expression hardened. Step off the bike. She did, slowly, calmly. I'm a federal law enforcement officer, she said. My credentials are in the storage compartment on the bike. I'm going to retrieve them. Larkin's hand slapped the snap of his holster. Do not move. Cora froze. I'm not reaching for a weapon, she said clearly. I'm a federal agent. My badge is in that compartment. Anyone can say that, Larkin replied. Then call it in. FBI Atlanta Field Office. Special Agent Cora Bowmont. Larkin stared at her for a long moment. Then he made his decision. Turn around. Hands behind your back. I've done nothing wrong. Turn around. She complied. He grabbed her arm hard and twisted her toward the bike. Her hips struck the seat as he snapped the cuffs on. They're too tight, she said calmly. You mentioned that, Larkin replied. Across the street, Councilwoman Lucy Brand had stopped walking. She raised her phone and pressed record. The processing desk at the station smelled like coffee and floor cleaner. Cora sat quietly while the desk sergeant typed her information into the system. My name is Special Agent Cora Bowmont, she said calmly. FBI Atlanta Field Office. Badge number 2247. The sergeant typed the name. For seconds later, he froze. He leaned closer to the screen, then leaned back slowly. The color drained from his face. Larkin pushed off the wall nearby. "What?" The monitor turned toward him. Larkin read the screen. For the first time, his confidence cracked. Commander Sharma arrived minutes later. He walked into the room slowly, reading every face. Then he approached Cora, Agent Bowmont. "Commander, I've spoken with your office. Deputy Director Cole is on the line." Cora stood. Before following him to the office, she said quietly, "I identified myself 4 times. I requested a report number. I complied with every instruction. I want that documented." "It will be," Sharma said. That evening, Cora returned home instead of visiting her mother. Her phone buzzed hours later. A message, then another. She opened the first. It was a video link. Lucy Brand had posted the recording. The footage showed everything. The stop, the accusation, the cuffs. The caption read, "This woman is a 20-year FBI special agent. She committed no crime. Watch and decide for yourself." Within hours, the video had hundreds of thousands of views. By midnight, it had passed 400,000. National outlets began sharing it. Civil rights organizations reposted it. People weren't just angry. They were focused. The next morning, attorney Julia Marsh called. "I've seen the video," she said, "and I'm already working." Julia had been Cora's father's colleague for years. If she said she was working, it meant something serious was already happening. They spent the day building a timeline. Every detail, every name, every moment of the stop. Then Councilwoman Brand arrived with files. 3 other residents had experienced similar stops on the same road. Same corridor, same type of vehicle, same result. Vehicles seized, charges quietly dropped later, but the cars never returned. Cora began digging. One name appeared in every seizure file. Meridian Towing and Recovery. Owner, Craig Rivers. She cross-checked public records. Craig Rivers was Sheriff Ray Dobbs' brother-in-law. The towing contract had been awarded without competitive bidding. Cora leaned back in her chair. "The towing company gets the vehicles," she said slowly. "The county processes forfeiture. Rivers profits from storage and auction." Julia nodded. "And the stops happen in one specific corridor." That night, Cora pinned a map of Meridian Boulevard to her wall. She marked every stop, 23 red dots, all inside 14 blocks. Julia texted back after seeing the photo. "That's not a pattern," she wrote. "That's a pipeline." Days later, Officer Garver called her privately. His voice shook. The theft report Larkin mentioned had never existed. Cora stayed silent. He saw her bike and said, "Bet that bike isn't hers." That's what started it. Then Garver revealed something bigger. Larkin kept a private log, a shared digital record of productive stops, vehicles, locations, estimated values, targets. Meridian Boulevard appeared again and again. Days later, Garver backed off his statement. Someone had pressured him. The shared drive with the log was wiped. The department claimed nothing improper happened. Sheriff Dobbs even held a press conference defending Larkin. But Cora had spent 20 years investigating people who believed evidence could disappear. She contacted a cyber forensics expert. The drive had been wiped, but the cloud backup hadn't. The log still existed. 41 entries for years of stops, estimated vehicle values, expected forfeiture profits, and one entry made before Cora's arrest. Matte black Italian sport bike. Estimated value $28K plus. Her bike had been flagged as a target. They hadn't just stopped her, they had hunted her. Julia filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. Then the evidence went to the U.S. attorney. The logbook, the towing records, the financial connections. The conspiracy became undeniable. Federal indictments followed. Sheriff Ray Dobbs, Officer Emil Larkin, Craig Rivers, multiple officers, obstruction charges, civil rights violations, fraud, asset forfeiture conspiracy. 10 days after the arrest, Cora stood at a press conference. She didn't talk about herself. Instead, she read the names of the 23 people who had been targeted on Meridian Boulevard. Each one, slowly, Clearly, what happened to me had a witness, she said. What happened to them happened in the dark. Then she stepped away from the podium. Months later, the case is concluded. Sheriff Dobbs received 14 years in federal prison. Craig Rivers received 18. Officer Emil Larkin accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to 11 years. His badge was permanently revoked. Dozens of victims had their cases expunged. Vehicles were returned or compensated. The towing company was dissolved, and the stretch of Meridian Boulevard where the stops happened was renamed. Cora rode her Ducati down that road one afternoon months later. The same road, the same sunlight, the same city. But the system that had once operated quietly along that corridor was gone. She rode past the exact spot where the cuffs had closed around her wrists. She didn't slow down. The engine roared beneath her as the road opened ahead. She wasn't riding away from anything. She was riding toward the life she had fought to protect. And this time, no one was going to stop her. The road stretched out in front of her as the Ducati's engine settled into its steady rhythm. The air was warm, the same kind of afternoon light that filled the street 10 days earlier when everything had begun. But the weight in her chest was different now. Back then, she had been riding toward her mother's house, thinking about pot roast and sweet tea. Now she was riding through a city that had just watched an entire system collapse because one moment on a public street had been caught on camera. Cora kept her eyes forward. The city looked the same. Storefronts, trees, traffic lights turning from green to yellow and back again. People walking their dogs. Kids riding bicycles. But she knew something had shifted beneath the surface. Systems that operate in the dark depend on silence. They depend on people believing nothing will change. That belief had been broken. She rode past Dawson's pharmacy, where Lucy Brand had stood with her phone raised, refusing to look away. The sidewalk was empty now, but Cora remembered exactly where the woman had stood. That single decision to keep recording had changed everything. The Ducati rolled past the intersection where the patrol cruiser had first appeared behind her. Cora didn't slow down. She kept riding. Later that evening, she finally arrived at her mother's house. The small white home sat at the end of a quiet street lined with maple trees. The porch light was already on, even though the sun hadn't fully set. Her mother had always done that. A light on the porch meant someone was expected. Cora shut off the engine and pulled off her helmet. The sudden silence felt almost strange after the deep roar of the motorcycle. She walked up the path slowly. Before she could knock, the door opened. Her mother stood there in a floral apron, hands still dusted with flour. "You're late," she said softly, but her eyes were smiling. Cora stepped inside. The familiar smell of the kitchen wrapped around her instantly. Pot roast, fresh bread, sweet tea cooling on the counter. For a moment, she just stood there breathing it in. Her mother looked at her wrist. The faint bruise from the cuffs had almost faded, but it was still visible if you knew where to look. Her mother didn't ask questions. Instead, she simply reached out and took Cora's hand. "Come sit," she said. Cora sat at the kitchen table she had grown up at. Her mother placed a plate in front of her that had clearly been reheated more than once over the past week. "I kept in the refrigerator," she said, "just in case." Cora smiled. "Thank you, Mama." They ate quietly for a few minutes. Finally, her mother spoke. "I saw the news." Cora nodded. "You all right?" "Yes, ma'am." Her mother studied her face carefully, the way mothers do when they want to see what their children aren't saying. After a moment, she nodded. "Your father would have been proud of you." Cora looked down at her plate for a second. Julia said the same thing. Her mother poured fresh sweet tea into both glasses. "You know what your father used to say," she added. "What's that?" "He used to say justice doesn't move fast, but it moves when someone refuses to step aside." Cora thought about that for a moment, about the video, about Garver finally coming forward, about the hidden logbook, sitting in a cloud server nobody knew existed, about the dozens of people who had been stopped on Meridian Boulevard before her. Then she looked around the kitchen again. Same table, same window over the sink, same quiet neighborhood. For the first time since the arrest, she felt something settle inside her. Peace. Not the loud, dramatic kind. Just the quiet feeling of being exactly where she belonged. 3 months later, Cora returned fully to duty at the Atlanta field office. Her desk hadn't changed. The same files, the same computer, the same coffee mug she had left behind the day administrative leave began. Her colleagues greeted her like nothing had changed, but everyone knew something had. She had taken down a corrupt sheriff's office and exposed a 4-year criminal operation, and she had done it without ever raising her voice, just by refusing to disappear. That afternoon, she stepped outside the building during her break. Her Ducati waited in the parking lot. Sunlight reflected off the matte black paint. She walked over and ran her hand across the fuel tank the way she always did. The metal was warm from the sun. For a moment, she remembered Wade standing in the garage years ago, grease on his hands, laughing while music played from an old radio. She could almost hear him saying it. Take it for a ride. So she did. The engine roared to life. Traffic opened ahead of her as she pulled onto the highway. Wind rushed past her helmet as the city stretched out in every direction. The road was wide, clear, endless, and for the first time in a long time, Cora Bowmont wasn't chasing anyone. She was simply riding forward, exactly the way Wade had always loved, exactly the way she had rebuilt the bike to do, toward the next case, toward the next fight, toward the life she had earned. And she didn't look back.